You put your mind to something, you move, you go in some ups and downs, you get experience going in the downs, and then boom, look what happens at the end. You get there, or you don't get there, and you realize that failing, actually, it was kind of cool. It was kind of a fun experience.
Well, I was thinking of you. I heard this expression. The expression is, a writer is someone to whom writing does not come easy. And I thought that that is the perfect description of you.
There you go. That is definitely me. Uh, yeah, really, like I don't know if anything that like I supposedly care about, once it's actually the thing I'm supposed to do, I don't think anything has come easy. Like I always like I'm doing one activity, and then I think I'm procrastinating on that activity with some other passion, and I'm like, oh, that's what I should be doing. And as soon as that's what I'm supposed to be doing, it becomes not easy.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like any of it is easy for you. It seems like it's hard to be Tim Urban, in a very sort of first world privileged, like nice way. It doesn't seem like it's easy to be Tim Urban.
Yeah, well, my goal is, and I'll report back on this, but I'm doing another book now, and I'm starting my own podcast, and I'm like, I have a bunch of new projects which I've been dying to start, but I've been stuck in this other book for a while, and I'm trying to reconfigure my life in a way that it isn't hard to be Timber, where it's nice to be Timber, where it's like okay, this is fun.
Why is it so hard to be Tim Urban? What gets in the way?
Um, it's it's a combination of it's like there's some muscle that people like you have. Somehow you got it. I don't know where. And I don't have that muscle where you can just make a grown up plan for yourself with no external person telling you have to do it. There's no teacher saying you have to be in class at this time, and there's no parent saying that, and you don't have a deadline. And you just do it because it's the right thing to do, because it's the selfishly right thing to do. It's what you've chosen it makes sense to do it. And that muscle for me is I just resist that usually. So procrastination, maybe perfectionism, these are kind of two sides of the same coin. But I will say that I also am someone who believes in growth. I think it's like very easy when you've been some way for your whole life, or when you're stuck in a long time habit, to just think this is just to give up and say, that's just who I am.
Yeah.
And I don't, I don't believe that, actually, because habits are just kind of it's the automated software running in your head, and if you can train it differently, like a dumb dog. And so I'm using this transition period to try to like actively make some very like obvious changes and do better.
So to mix metaphors, you're broken, but you're not fixed.
I would say I'm broken, but I'm fixable.
Well, that's what I mean. So you're not fixed, like a growth or a fixed mindset, right? Are you capable of
not
change?
Fixed.
Yes.
Not that kind of fixed. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Exactly. Okay. You were being more clever than I realized. Yes, I'm broken, but I'm not fixed. Yeah. I just think about it. Humans are so plastic. I mean, think about humans who have had to, my wife's parents grew up in Iran, and that's where they thought they were going to live their whole lives, and they had family and life and careers there, and then they had to suddenly in 1979 move to the U.S. where they didn't speak. It's like people can make giant, massive adjustments, and we are survival machines, right? And so it's like there's no reason I can't make some tiny, much easier life adjustment at any point in my life. I'm very convinced about that.
So is the muscle that's not there for you? Is it not there for you in all things, or is it only in certain kinds of things?
It's there in the category of things where it is the thing I'm supposed to be doing. It's the job. It's not the procrastination from the job. I'll be working on one thing, and then suddenly I get excited about doing this chart showing how long history has been, and I'll spend 4 deep focused hours doing it and then tweet it out, right? And because it's not the thing I was supposed to be doing. So it has to be the thing I'm supposed to be doing, and B, it has to be something where no one else is involved. There's no other. If I have a collaborator, I'm much better about this. If I'm working with someone, It's a much better situation. It's really when I'm really left to my own devices. And so then this other part of me kicks in that's like, ooh, this is hard though. Let's do it in a few minutes. Let's just not right now, not at this exact moment. And then that goes on for 5 hours, or I'll get into research that I'm supposed to be doing, but I'll like then go way too far with it and end up watching like an hour and a half YouTube video about it that I really shouldn't be, but it's interesting. And, so there's a lot of like kind of compulsive parts of my personality that I think like take over. But it's, and it's a source of misery. It's like when I'm in better and more control of that, I'm like much, and that's why for me, having shorter deadlines, like having weekly blog posts was actually a good match for me, or doing like a weekly podcast, because then the misery is contained. I'll be miserable for 3 days. Panic monster comes in. I go and freak out and finish it. And now I'm so happy and so relieved. And it was all worth it. When I publish something, it's always all worth it. Oh my God, this is so gratifying. And I'm so happy it's done. And I'm so proud of this now. So the goal is to just try to like change that equation a little I think is a part of it again, is this delusion where we our mutual friend Near Eyal, right? He and I would co-work together, and Near is very productive. He writes a book, and then he writes another book, and then he writes another book, and he also has a child, and he's very he gets his stuff done. And I work with him, and we write for 45 minutes, and he's like, okay, that's a good day, and he stops. Or maybe he'll be like, oh, let's do a long one. He'll work for an hour and a half, and then he's like, okay, good long day. And I'm thinking that I'm going to write for 8 hours today. But if I actually add up the time when I'm deep focused writing, it's probably less than Near is actually deep focused writing. So it's this delusion that you can do more than everyone else, and you end up doing less than everyone else. And so like it's just accepting reality, which is like I'm not going to do more than 2 hours of deep focused writing on an average day. That's just not realistic. And B, that's a lot. If I just do that, it seems like it's too good to be true. I can just do 2 hours. It's like, no, there's some kind of like masochistic thing that's like, that's not hard enough work. You have to, and so it's just, so it's a kind of a double delusion there.
Yeah. Someone emailed me once and they said something about how we always seem to underestimate the power of consistent but average like contributions or results. And so I think people would be shocked to hear that a writer might only work for 45 minutes or an hour a day, because they also buy into the idea of 8 hours or marathon sessions, but that can't be done consistently very well or very often. And meanwhile, if you work 45 minutes a day every day for a lot of days in a row, that actually does add up very quickly, whatever writing or any activity. Yes.
A writer should be a tortoise. Like if you think about it, if you're trying to drive, if doing a book is driving from New York to LA, it's like, if you actually think of it, if I want to spend, 300 total days of work on this, which is like a little over a year of weekdays. Okay, 3,000 miles. I got to go 10 miles a day. And the problem is for someone who, if it's a very grown up thing to realize that I'm going from mile 340 to 350 today. And that is a success of a day. And that's the unit of a finished book in 1 year, right? But when I was writing short, 1 week blog posts, there was this adrenaline where the thing I'm writing right now is going to be seen by all my readers in 2 days. And it's going to be so exciting. And I can't wait to see what people think of this. And the adrenaline, it's like, this is it's like the dumb part of your brain, the kind of instant gratification, kind of unconscious primitive part of your brain. It thinks that can see the end there. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, I'm excited too. But when you're going from mile 340 to 350 out of 3,000, that dumb part of your brain can't see LA. Can't even understand that LA is going to happen. It just sees this isn't exciting. Nothing new. My life won't be any different at the end of this workday. And so it can be very hard to actually, that's where the resistance comes in. Like, what's the point even of going from 10 miles in this?
Sure.
It's like, it just feels so hopeless. But of course it's not.
Yeah, I find the other thing about, so like, let's say you're working on a singular blog post, something you're going to publish in a few days. Not only is there the validation, but there's also the sense of mastery or confidence that comes from like, you have the whole thing more or less in your head, right? You're like, you can imagine it. It's a small, even if it's a 10,000 word blog post, you're doing it in short enough time and it's contained enough that you're like, I know everything that I think about this. Whereas a book or any kind of longer project, like starting a company, you actually don't know all the twists and turns of that road. It's impossible for you to have it all in your head at one time. And so the sort of fortitude to sit with the fact that actually all I know are the 10 miles in front of me, and the sort of intellectual humility to stick solely with that, it takes a lot of discipline. It's easier to just do a lot of self-contained smaller things than to work on a component piece of a larger whole.
Yeah, because if all of the if you every day could be team up and be one big brain, they could see the whole thing and they could
Yeah.
see the whole project. But you're in one little slice, and that's why you have to basically. There's a lot of self trust. It's like the dumb part of your brain that needs instant gratification and is not going to get it from this random Tuesday of work. Needs to learn to trust like the smart part of your brain that understands that this is a big project, that it will come together in the end. There needs to be some kind of like, yeah, like just like ceding of the authority to that part of your brain, which is what procrastinators have a hard time doing. They are just you know the they're at the whim of this instant gratification monkey, is like, as I would call it. Like um but it's but all you have to do is just again, I'm great at giving advice to others. Like I can just I just don't follow it myself very well. But that's what I would say to like a writer. I would say the difference between like, so just say there's two wannabe authors and neither one's written a book. And then one starts just really, light, just doing, also, let's say 1 page, 3 days a week. So 4 days does nothing. 3 days, wakes up in the morning, pulls their laptop on their bed and types for a half hour or an hour before they, or maybe 2 hours before they get up and brush their teeth and do their thing, right? And the other wannabe writer is just like that writer, except it doesn't do the 3 pages a week because it thinks, oh, it's hopeless. What's the point of doing a page? I don't even know. So
Yeah.
it's like, actually, and there's 112 waking hours in the week. The wannabe writer has all 112. The person who writes 3 pages a week, maybe they have 106 or 108 of those. And that's almost the same, right? They're living almost the same exact week, except
Yeah.
flash 2 years later, and there's a 300-page book, a 300-page manuscript, and there's nothing. And it's like, once you realize that, it's just like the idea that, it's this idea that things compile over time, but it's just not intuitive. Our brains aren't really wired to think that way, to understand that, because think about, what we're wired for, being in a tribe sometime a long time ago. You just didn't have slow annual projects. That's not how it really works. I mean, maybe you're building a new hut and that's, but it's like you can see it in front of you and you're desperate and there's panic and like, so you have to do some overriding of our intuition.
You broke up for a second, but I'm sure it recorded it. The other, obviously writing is one place you can talk about this, but the other place where our sort of minds obviously fail us in this regard is like saving for retirement. Ramit, who we both know, talks about this a lot. You just have to make pretty consistent automatic transfers or deposits in an account that captures the sort of compounding returns of the stock market. You don't have to save that much money for that long for it to start to get very powerful very quickly. But we're not good at it. We delay getting started, and then every year that we delay getting started, or every dollar that we don't contribute that we could have contributed because we did something else we weren't supposed to do, or we thought of a get rich quick scheme or something, it actually moves the goalpost further out of view, makes it less likely that we'll actually get where we want to go.
That's a double whammy too, because you have the time component of investing a little now for long far away, which is not intuitive. There's another not intuitive thing there, which is compound growth. We are not wired to understand think exponentially, right? I mean, again, someone in 20,000 BC, there was really nothing exponential in their life. Everything was linear, right? So they think in straight lines. And of course, today in advanced civilization, there's exponential curves all over the place. And we are so bad at internalizing that. You have to kind of override our linear mind to see the power of that and to understand how that works. So when you do a book, because you do books, I
Well,
mean,
this is
I
true
feel like
for
every
building an
time,
audience.
yeah, yes, that's true too. It's it's like getting your first sorry, we're having some getting your first 10,000 followers, getting your first 1,000 followers on Twitter it's like each order of magnitude is an equal step. Getting from 1,000 to 10 is as hard as the first. Getting to 100, getting to a million, getting to when you get to 1,000, you're actually like, in some ways, you're like you've done one of the four steps on the way to a million or whatever. And um, and so it doesn't feel like that at the time. Because again, you're thinking linearly, but it's really more logarithmic in this case. And a lot of people give up in that first thing before the hockey stick takes off, because they're projecting, they're extrapolating the linear curve from where they're going, and it doesn't look very good.
Yeah, you have to, when they talk about like trusting the process, right? Like whether it's trusting the process of retirement or trusting the process of mastering a skill or trusting the process of, turning around a sports franchise. Um, I don't think we're good at comprehending how much trust is actually required, right? Because there is that early period where you're doing all the stuff right and you're gaining one follower a day, or you saw the interest in your account, you got a $2.75 interest payment. You're like, this is never going to get me to the point where I don't have to worry about money anymore. Or on a book, you're like, I worked all day and I am one page closer. Like, I can't do this, but it's really the ability to sort of suspend disbelief, to leap into the dark and to hand yourself over to some process that people before you have been through. I think that's the main thing. Like, people who have the ability to trust a process are going to be people who can take advantage of that process. But if you are ultimately cynical, or as you were saying earlier, like if you don't believe you're capable of change, like deep down you don't think it will work, you're probably not going to commit to said process to a level that actually lets you take advantage of it. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that regard.
Also, it's not even quite as simple as like, oh, you made one page of progress, or you gained this much money, because sometimes you lose money, in the stock market it goes down, or you write a bunch of pages and you realize that the whole last 20 pages, and I'm cutting it, it's not, I don't like where I've been going with this. And the point is, again, if you zoom out, what you see is a stock market chart, both with your writing and whatever. It's going to go up and then it's going to go down, but it's going to go up over time. And so again, people really give up on those little downswings. And that's, there's all, so much of life is a broadly upward moving stock chart that has lots of downs along the way. And it's hard not to lose your nerve in those downs, because again, the dumb part of our brain truly can't see more than 3 feet ahead of you. So you have to be able to, and you lose a lot of motivation. It's very demotivating in those moments. And that trust in the process, I mean, I think once you've seen it work once, it's easier to have it, trust it again. But a lot of, especially people who have never really, they've never been able to get themselves to do a big project. There's just no confidence in a process. And it's, somehow David has to beat Goliath in that first time to see it work. And then they can at least give you that faith. Because, you said the words deep down, you don't believe, right? And I think that self-fulfilling prophecies are very real. And it's like if you consider these two characters in your brain, the kind of rational character that knows about exponential curves and understands that it's a process and wants to have good work ethic, and then the other part of your brain that can see 2 feet in front of you and needs gratification and needs adrenaline to do anything, or panic. And it's almost like you're not either of those. It's like they're like in a gladiator pit, battling, and you're a spectator and you're watching. And it's like who you believe is going to win, if you could bet who you're truly betting on with a rational bet, that gives that character so much strength in your mind, and that's where your confidence is. So your confidence is that I'm confident that the monkey's going to win, and I'm not confident that I'm going to do what I want to do. That monkey just got like Popeye spinach, and it's like on steroids. And so that's why it's like you have to somehow have David beat Goliath a few times. And now the observer in the stands actually starts to think, I'm not sure it's a smart bet to bet on the monkey. They've lost 3 times in a row. I might bet on the other guy. And that's like, whoa, that's a totally different like self-image. Your whole storyline is different in your head right now. And so, yeah.
I've said this before. I say I don't believe in myself. I have evidence. Well, it's funny. We always look at the people that are wired or act differently than us, and we think that it's somehow better, even though it comes with its own demons, right? Like I remember one time I was in my swimming pool with my wife. We didn't have kids yet, but I was in the pool, and we just gotten in, and all of a sudden I'm like swimming around, like looking at. There's something about it that was bothering me. Like I thought it was broken, or I thought we could fix this thing. And then I was like, do you want to swim laps? And she was like, we could just be in the pool. She was like, we could just be in the water. We don't have to like do anything. And so for me, it's usually the opposite problem, which is I do. I think there's a certain part of me that's always been sort of wired towards doing stuff. And then obviously that becomes self-fulfilling and you get momentum and then you believe in the process and it works. And it's a virtuous circle. But the vicious part of it is it makes it hard for you to not do stuff because you understand that not doing stuff there's an opportunity cost, right, to not doing stuff or to not taking advantage of every moment or not being fully optimized. And so for me, like I'm in the middle of this right now. I was supposed to do I'm doing this series on the cardinal virtues. So I did the first 2 books, and then the next book was supposed to come out this fall, and it's more or less done. And then I would be starting just about now. I would be starting the 4th book in the series, and I made the decision to kick that whole process out a year. And weirdly, like I have been dealing with a whole bunch of sort of existential issues stemming from the fact that when I wake up in the morning, I don't have a thing that I have to be doing to hit a deadline that I've given myself. And there's a sort of an unmooredness to that like clearly at some point I felt when I was younger and really didn't like that feeling and built a life around not ever having that feeling. And that's not healthy either.
Yeah. I've always wondered if like, I always, people, I always assumed, okay, if I dug into my why I self defeat in this way, it must be some kind of like deep inner, shame or self esteem or something. And then I was thinking one day that I wonder if it's maybe the opposite, which um, is that maybe there's some kind of like feeling that most people develop from their parents' values of shame for not going outside all day or shame for not being productive. And that's like a stick that gets implanted in their head that hits them when and they're scared of that stick. And maybe I lack that. Maybe it's like, so I don't know, but hearing you say that brings that thought back. Like, maybe, um, yeah, like your thing to overcome would be like you said with the wife in the pool, which is like, um, there's a dependency on the feeling that you're achieving something. There's some kind of emotional dependency there, which again serves you really well in so many ways. But it's interesting digging into like what that is.
Well, work for me, like sitting down and writing in the flow state of writing, is a wonderful feeling. It's very soothing, and it's more or less in my control, right? Like the world is complicated, the world is unpredictable, the world is all of these things. But when I sit down and I have the material that I've researched, I get to move these things around at will. I get to live with these ideas and people and characters and concepts that I find very stimulating and meaningful. Um, And, I'm the master of my domain, right? I'm moving the words around on the page. I'm doing the thing that I'm really good at. I don't have to listen or do any other things. The volume on the inconveniences of life is turned down for that brief period. And so to not do that, either because I'm procrastinating or because I'm practicing self-restraint and I'm saying, hey, to do this sustainably over a long period of time, you have to pace yourself. There's distress in that. You're sort of willingly feeling a discomfort that's maybe akin to the discomfort you're feeling from actually concentrating. But at the core, I think as humans, we try to stay in our comfort zone.
Right. So, we're actually maybe just both avoiding suffering, and that it's like we're both doing the least painful thing, right? And so the question is, and I probably believe, rather than try to, it's like you can do, you can, if you want to change in life, you can do one of two things. You can try to go for suffering. What's the most sufferable thing? Let me do that and train yourself to be more masochistic in a way. Or you could try to reconfigure your psychology, reframe, change the way your schedule looks, change your reward structure such that you reconfigure what is the most suffering, right? So you can still, okay, let suffering be the rudder. That's fine, but I'm going to like change the direction of the wind or something, So, yeah.
Well, it's like discipline for some people is like buckling down and doing the thing. And then discipline for other people is like taking your foot off the gas, right? And not doing something. And I'm probably more in that second category than the first category. I mean, there's definitely things where I'm not that way, but it's just sort of understanding like what is the harder thing for you, and then why is that the harder thing, and then do you have the resources or the willpower to to go towards that thing? Because I think ideally, you want to be in control, not your desires or your aversions. The Stoics would say that at the end of the day, those are the same thing, right? Like if you're repulsed by something or, overwhelmingly attracted to that thing, in either case, you're not really in control. Some deeper
The
part of you is, and you've got to
electromagnetic
figure that out.
field, the electromagnetic field is driving your everything. Yeah.
Yes. And that's probably not good.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm probably very, uh, yeah, I'm very much like inside the electromagnetic field, and that's, I guess I was saying that there's two ways you can go towards the suffering. You can try to reconfigure the field direction so it's pulling you, or I guess what the Stoics would say is, no, you're not thinking big enough. You need to ascend above the electromagnetic field where it's not, now you're in control. Which is yeah, that's really interesting. It could be hugely empowering, I imagine, if you can pull it off.
Well, I was just thinking about something you said, though, about sort of building the muscle or having the experience with finishing projects, because I know you just became a parent. And one of my favorite Paul Graham essays, his kids are older, and he was talking about, do you send them to college? How do you prepare them for the world? And he basically comes up with this idea that the most important thing you could give a kid are a series of projects, like things that they get really interested in, that they work on, and that becomes a microcosm of learning some of the lessons that we're talking about. So for one kid, maybe it's building model trains. For other kids, it's, making the football team. For other kids, it's learning a foreign language. But I am a big believer in the idea of having projects, because once you've done something, like you've built an audience, or you've written a book, or you've lost 200 pounds, or you've moved across the country, it doesn't matter what that thing is. If you've done stuff like that, then to me, that's the transferable skill, where you're like, I leapt off the ledge, I felt the terror of falling down, and then I built the airplane and I didn't crash, right? Like the ability to have that sort of, to see a process or a project all the way through, that's like the most valuable skill you can acquire as a person, because that's what life is.
That's the evidence you talked about, right? Like and it is an interesting thing where when you haven't ever succeeded in something, whether you've tried it or not, even, it just it's just, again, it says something about our nature. It feels impossible, right? It feels like oh, that's one in a million, or it just takes so much luck or whatever. And there is, this is the Steve Jobs, quote about once you realize that the world around you is built by people no smarter than yourself, and you can get in there and you can push things, and something else falls out, and you can change the shape of things. Your life is never the same again. It's this great epiphany, and I do believe that it's this a combo of, it's not necessarily that you realize that you're more powerful or you're more special than you are. It's that you realize that the world is not that awesome or impressive, and that, like, any game you want to get in and try to win, you know like, the people who are currently winning it are, they're just humans also, but the same amount of time you have, they have flaws also. Granted, there's harder games than others. If you want to, be on, play in the Masters and win the, okay, you're gonna have to, but even there, it's like, I'm sure a lot of people that actually could have gotten there just give up right away. Say, that's impossible. You have to be so lucky. And it's like, well, it's actually, these other guys are there, and they're just humans. They were just a baby with a bottle at some point, and they're not magical. Great. If you want to be in the NBA, okay, you need a certain height or whatever. But really, for most things, I would just give our careers as an example. Like, there's a lot of people out there with a ton of insight. They observe things. They have interesting ways of thinking about things. Their friends love hearing their way of thinking because they're so interesting. And that person, like, has everything they need to go and suddenly be a big time, writer, author, whatever kind of thing. And they have this barrier, where it feels like they just don't realize that it is totally doable. And so they don't even try it. So many people don't even try it in the first place. But that's why the Paul Graham thing makes sense. You're teaching a kid early. You put your mind to something. You move. You go in some ups and downs. You get experience going in the downs, and then boom! Look what happens at the end. You get there, or you don't get there, and you
And
realize
it's no
that
big deal.
failing isn't it? Yeah, it's no big deal. Actually, it was kind of cool. It was kind of a fun experience, and, like, now you're excited. So either way, it's got to be so useful.
Yeah, I wrote about this in the Daily Dad a little bit. Like, everyone today is talking about this idea of Nepo babies, and we're sort of all very upset and outraged at it. I wonder how much of the Nepo baby thing, like, why do the children of successful people become successful in that chosen field? Obviously, there's genetic advantages. Obviously, there's relational advantages. But I wonder how much of it is like you saw your mom or dad do that thing, and it made it very humanizing to you. You're like, yeah, dad goes to work at an NBA arena, and that's a normal place to go to work. And there's a path to getting into that thing that isn't unattainable and crazy. Like, when I was growing up, none of my parents' friends didn't have jobs. Like, all my parents' friends had jobs. I didn't know a single entrepreneur. I didn't know a single creative person. So it wasn't until I went to college, and then I met people like professors and writers and stuff, and realized that these were just normal people, and that it was a job, not unlike being a school principal or having a construction company or something, that it's just a job, right? And so I think one of the things that, like, growing up the child of a person who is in a path, an untraditional path like that, is it becomes a lot more familiar to you, and thus a lot less intimidating. And that's actually the real advantage, more than money or genetics.
Yeah, you're also just witnessing someone whose worldview is that society is my plaything, society is my canvas, and, like, and I'm, and I have fun with it. I go and, like, I do my thing in society, as opposed to someone who's cowering before society and thinking, like, who's, the opposite of that attitude. I think is someone whose parents, and which is a lot of parents around me when I grew up, they're very into prestige, and prestige is just another way of saying, like, you're getting a pat on the head from society. You're treating society like this really important thing, big scary thing to approve of you, and as opposed to thinking of society as my playground. Now let's get out there and mess around with it. And totally different way. And so if you're around this, the vibe of society is big and scary, you're just going to absorb that, and you're going to have to override that. One of the ways I remember reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it was like mind blowing. It was actually a terribly written book, and it's like, it's like run on sentences, and it's like redundant, and it doesn't matter. The concept I had never heard. I was like 20. I remember reading it, and it was this idea that, like, you can have make money like by like just being creative and not having a job. And it was like, it was just, but it's, some people are just around that from the beginning. They're just, of course, and their parents are always Paul Graham's kids. Imagine like how ahead they are in this regard. They're just hearing from someone who's, very wise in this. He's a great communicator, but B, he also, his life has been in turning, teaching people how to make society theirs. So yeah, I mean, it's absorbing. It's not just watching them go into the arena or whatever, but it's like just thinking. You absorb so much from your parents, just osmosis. Just in, and I think, yeah, I grew up in a suburb where everyone's parents were lawyers, doctors, teachers, yeah.
That's what I think is so funny about that college admissions scandal, right? Like these were all extremely rich, extremely powerful families, most of whom had become extraordinarily successful through untraditional paths, right? Entrepreneurial, creative, acting, whatever. And the message they were sending their kids is that actually all of that is totally worthless. At the end of the day, society is a set of rules. It's this fixed competition with a fixed number of spots available if you want to do something in life. And these spots are so valuable that we actually have to cheat to get them. But if we don't cheat to get them, you will be a loser and nothing will happen for you, right? Which is like the exact opposite of their lived experience. And I think there's an irony in that these people so wanted to secure advantages to their kids, like a degree from Harvard or the networking that would come from this school or that school, when they already had given them the enormous advantage of showing them that the world is like flexible and malleable and you can make your own path. And they are like if you're a billionaire hedge fund manager, what kind of advantages networking wise do you think your kid is going to get at Harvard? Like, you can just introduce them to those people from your own life. Like the whole thing just struck me as such a weird commentary on how humans can abandon the very thing that made them successful in the first place.
Well, it goes back to, again, our wiring. It's really intuitive to humans to be inside whatever game is being played around them. And if there's and so those parents are talking to other parents and their kids went to here and their kids went here. And that's actually like, and even though they have every reason to see this game is not what we should be playing, you just get sucked in. And
it's not even real.
Me of like, no, but okay. So I remember I was on I loved traveling alone. It's one of my favorite things. Just go on like a trip by myself and I meet people. This outgoing side of me comes out that's never out in the US. And I made a ton of friends. I'm still in touch with them, whatever. So I go on this one thing. I was in some like canoe thing and like a 2 or 3 day thing in like the Amazon. And there's a group of other, backpackers there from like, I don't know where they're from, Britain, other places in Europe. And normally it's just I just make friends with the European backpacker. Right away, we'd all be buddies, right? I don't know whether I was being annoying or they weren't my type or they hate Americans or maybe I was in my head, but I felt out group. There was like maybe, I think there was 4 or 5 of them. I don't even know whether I don't remember if they knew each other or not, but they weren't being very friendly. And so every part of my smart brain would say, well, all right, it's kind of interesting. Like, why are they being like, going, oh, I could dig into my book on this trip instead. I thought I was going to be hanging out. I'll never see them again either way. Like, cool, I'll go see, it is, and yet what happened was I got really upset about it. I found myself really like feeling, and I felt like I was in middle school and I felt like, and I was like, wishing they would be friendlier and invite me over to their, and I was like, what is this? Makes absolute, how am I suddenly upset about being outgrouped by 4 randos I will never see again, who I just met? And it's just, the point is, if there's, and that's one of the games, of course, we are really susceptible to, is the in-group, out-group, middle school game. This is, I think a lot of like political tribalism comes around, from this. It's like, as soon as that game is being played around us, it's like there's pheromones in the air and the dumb part of our brain wakes up and is like, I need to win this game. And it can't zoom out at all. And I feel like that's another version of what's happening here when suddenly everyone around you, it's your worth as a family is about, did your kid go in, maybe you're a big movie star, but you're a dumb movie star, or do you have an actually smart family whose kid goes to, oh, suddenly I'm stuck in this game. And it's like, it just makes no sense at all. So you have to ask, like, what game, what game am I right now caught up in that I don't even realize makes no sense to care about?
Yeah, this kind of relates to your thing about the mammoth, the woolly mammoth of caring what other people think. It to be a person who didn't give a shit what other people thought for almost all of human history is a losing proposition. But in an artistic field, not caring what people think is how you break out, is how you do something unique. It's how you break through convention, so it's very hard to turn off a piece of wiring that has been there since before we were even conscious of there being such a thing as that kind of wiring.
This is like comedians. Think about what does a successful comedian do? Obviously, they have a knack for comedy. That's a big thing. But the other a huge part of what they're doing is they realize that they find the things that everyone's thinking, but no one's saying, either because everyone's scared to say it, or sometimes just because everyone has that experience, but they don't realize it's universal. And so when someone else says it, they say, "Oh my God, I did that too." And so what it is this ability to 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 know what everyone's thinking that no one's saying, and understand that like no one's actually offended by it. Everyone just like thinks society thinks it's offensive, but it's not actually like actually. And then they go and say it out loud, and the audience is in stitches. They're so delighted that someone is saying this thing, and it's a reflection not on the comedian but on the audience. Like, what? Why are we all so delighted to hear that? Because we're all scared to say this thing for some weird reason, because we're all in weird conformist people who are terrified of being different. And so yeah, it's
Well, you know what's fast. Well, you know what's fascinating is we were talking earlier, like some people discipline is doing stuff, and for some people discipline is not doing stuff. What's interesting about the sort of nonconformity thing you just mentioned is that, and we both know some of these very successful, interesting people, like most people sort of think like everyone else. And so there is a skill in thinking not like everyone else, right? Of sort of pausing when you're on the side of the majority and thinking differently. And then I think what's been interesting the last couple of years is watching some of the people who are really good at thinking differently. And this is how they built multi-billion-dollar fortunes or totally unique or interesting companies, to watch them struggle to grasp fairly obvious or straightforward or common sense things that the majority of the people have come to see. They're like, I guess what I'm saying is sometimes that nonconformist person actually has to have the ability to turn off that nonconformity, because what they're disagreeing about is, say, the existence of gravity, or you know what I mean? Like they're outsmarting themselves, basically. Like the public is actually right here, or the consensus view is actually more or less correct here, and your contrarian thinking or your nonconformist thinking is actually getting you in trouble. And I don't mean trouble in the sense that some people disagree with you. It's just taken you further afield than you think you are, because you're running the same playbook that served you well in the past, but it's actually screwing with your bearings in this case.
like an actual independent thinker, like, which is really hard to do. True independent thinking, who's just, it's not that you don't have, everyone has influences, but like you can observe and you can come and you can run with what you think. That person's gonna sometimes come up with contrarian things that are gonna shock everyone. And a lot of the other times they're gonna come up with the thing everyone else has, because it's not like the public's always wrong. And so what you're talking about is, it's like when there's a contrarian position be taken, there's kind of two kinds of people taking it. There's the independent thinker who happens to have come there for this particular topic, and then there's the person whose identity is being contrarian, and who they're not actually independent. That's not actually independent thinking. It's more independent than a total conformist, but it is actually like you're in your own prison, which is that I can never conform, because now my self-esteem is tied to being someone who doesn't conform, and that's not really great either. And I think some people can start as the first kind and then get hooked on the feeling of, and it's a lot more fun to be right when everyone's wrong than it is to be right when everyone's right. Um, but yeah, if real actual independent thinking, you have to continue to kind of remove prison walls that your mind's going to put up, because you're going to start to get like your ideas, or you're going to you're also going to get attached to your ideas that were really brilliant, but maybe times have changed and you have to. So it's a continual struggle to just push down the prison walls and kind of humble up and continue to be truly independent.
Yes. it's not just putting, I think Peter Thiel said this, it's not just putting a minus sign in front of what everyone else is thinking, because what if they're right?
Right. Yeah, and there's it's in some ways you end up. I mean, this is a little different, but like I've I learned a little bit about the flat Earth Society, which is real, and it's the people who there are at least when I checked last there were 10,000 members and counting, and probably bigger now. And what you find is that they don't just believe the Earth is flat; they also believe the moon landing was faked, and that JFK was, an inside job, and that 9/11 was, done by the Americans, and every single conspiracy that's out there, they believe because they have a paranoid mindset that anything that the consensus believes is wrong, which of course no one wants to be. That's not a good thinker, right? And so and then of course what you also find, and this is kind of a signal that something is wrong, is that people who are super contrarian, they end up with these pet theories though, and they become the opposite of they have almost like an overload of skepticism, but then they go flip the other way and go completely gullible when it comes to their pet theories. So the flat earther, you can bring them up in space and show them the Earth, and they'll say, "Oh, this is a screen," or "You've drugged me," or something. There's nothing, right? But as soon as you say, "Oh yeah, because ships, you shouldn't be able to see them there if the Earth were round," and the fact that without any they don't do the math. They just say, "See, there we go, more proof." They just believe whatever they right? So you see a lot of that is the same people who are uber contrarian are actually supremely gullible when it comes to things they do like.
Right. And because there is usually not a lot of good evidence for what they're talking about, when, a study that would otherwise be discredited or looked at weirdly or whatever, they need even the slightest veneer of sort of support or credentialism, right? So they'll jump all over, some weirdo academic that thinks the same way they do, even if in every other aspect that person is a crazy person. This happens, on all sides of the political spectrum, right? Like you don't like the other side, so then somebody agrees with you that the other side sucks. You're willing to overlook a lot of things about that person because it buttresses your side of the argument, or it gives you some appeal to authority that you otherwise wouldn't have.
Which isn't independent thinking. That's that your thinking settings are being configured based on the belief of the person you're hearing from, and so that your skepticism filter opens up wide. You let all, and then it goes super tight, and it's not being based on any kind of good metric. It's just on this thing. So you've been basically, and this happens to all of us. Your mind, your thinking process, has been captured by an ulterior motive, which is to believe this thing and to not believe that thing. And you can't have two sacred motives. So as soon as that, if truth can be the sacred motive, but something in that case has come above truth, and now your settings all reconfigure around that sacred motive. So now suddenly believing this thing, learning, proving this thing correct is now the sacred, the sacred value, and that's not independent either. Look, actual independent thinking should not be that interesting a lot. That person should say, "I don't know a ton," because unless it's something really straightforward, most things we just don't know that much as a species. There's not enough evidence, or there is, but you haven't put the time in to really dig into the evidence. So like that's a sign of an independent thinker. Is they're often they don't have an opinion. They're saying, "I don't know," and someone who's every opinion's really strong. There's a sign. There's some other proxy going on there for their beliefs.
So let me ask you about the new book, because one of the things I was interested in, we were talking about projects earlier, like how do you know you finish a project? You trust, you have the evidence, but you're 6 years into this project. It's taken so much longer than you thought. It's turned into a bunch of things, gone in a bunch of different directions that maybe you didn't think it would go. How did you know not to quit? Like, how did you know that you were heading in the right direction as opposed to stuck in a dead end?
I'm not sure I even knew it was the right direction as much as, well, first of all, there's just a lot of like silly human things like sunk cost fallacy. I don't know if I'm grown up enough to spend 4 years on a project and then throw it away. I just don't know if I can handle that. If I thought this thing was trash and I was like, this thing is actually just not, it's not what I wanted to. Okay, I think in the end that would win out. But like, if I think something has potential, a lot of times I've learned from blog posts. I'll put something out that I think is awesome and it doesn't really pop, and vice versa. I'll put something out that I think, oh, that's it's a cute thing, and then wow, it went viral. Like, and so I also just thought this certainly qualifies as as the quality of any of those other blog posts, some of which it surprised me. And so I felt it crossed the threshold where it was like, who knows? Let's put this out in the world and see what people think of it. This is. So I don't think it was some fully binary thing. I think there would have been a pretty intense threshold to actually quit, because look, what it was. And the worst case is this is what I've been thinking about for 6 years, and here's all the tools that I've been using. And I did a lot of what I use Twitter for is so many of the images in the book I would just tweet out, and it's a way to throw it against the wall and see if it sticks and just see how people react. So most of the things in there were pretty well tested. I'd run them by friends, and it was what I was thinking. And I was like, so if this is what I'm thinking, I don't have to. I don't know whether people will resonate or not, but I want to, that's kind of what I do. I'll put out things I'm thinking. It's not an academic paper that has to have, be replicated. It's just, there wasn't really much of a chance I was going to toss it. I did toss huge parts of it because it couldn't get that long, but the hard part was just when to stop adding in new things, because I will never do a book on current events again. Maybe an article on current events, and I'll do books on universal topics, of evergreen topics. A book on current events is a nightmare, because you want to, part of what makes it interesting. If someone's writing a Substack on current events, it's great because they're the thing that happened yesterday. Okay, here's what I think. Now imagine that Substack is a year delay. So it comes out in March of 24 April 24 for something, and they're writing about this last week. No one wants to read them, right? So you have to, that's one of the things. I didn't do print book for that reason, and I might do print on demand now. But I was like, if I don't do print, I can have this 1 month old only versus a year old, which is just not a good plan, or not, maybe not a year, it might have been 9 months old. And so the hard part was, I almost published this in 2020, and then George Floyd happens, and I'm writing about, society, politics. And it's like, it's just a seismic earthquake just happened in our society for lots of reasons. Just one of those times when, society's tectonic plates are pretty stubborn, and movements try to move them, and it's hard. And then something happens, whether it's a war or a giant protest, movement, or something, a 9/11 was one of these. It's an earthquake. The plates are moving. They're not going to be moving for long, maybe a couple months. And then they settle into a new stubborn equilibrium that might last 10 years. So the Bush administration said, boom, let's start a war right now. The plates are moving. All this opportunities there for movements, for politicians in this one moment. And it's also a danger. It's a scary time. The plates are moving, all the rules, desperate times, desperate measures, things go crazy. So anyway, there'd be things like that when I'd see an earthquake. And I'm like, well, the book I can't have the book come out, the pre-earthquake book come out post-earthquake. So anyway, I finally decided, things are going to keep moving. And that's okay. And I just need to publish. And so I just finally, and it's hard. It's hard finishing because I had to cut a lot, and cutting is nightmarish. And, but yes, finally it got out, and I think I feel good about the timing. I feel like, okay, it was, and still I believe is an expression of the current moment. Maybe in a year, it'll now feel like a little dated. Right now, it feels like it's still on point.
That is a weird thing that you learn. I think, who is the screenwriter? I'm forgetting his name, but there's a great William Goldman. He said, nobody knows anything, right? Nobody knows anything about what is or isn't going to work. And one of the things you learn putting stuff out there is that some of the things you had the most doubts about turned out to be fantastic and people loved them. And the thing you were most certain about didn't work at all. And there's some freedom in that, but it's also disorienting because now you don't know whether to trust your own doubts. Like I relate to what you're just saying is like when I published Daily Stoic, I remember I sent it to my editor and I was like, this is like, it was all designed. It was all ready to go. I was like, can you look at this one last time? I don't think we should publish this. I was like, I'm not sure this is good enough to publish. It came together too quickly, too easily. I'm just not sure this is the right career decision for me. And, that book changed my life. It sold 2 million copies. It's in all these different languages. It's been incredible. But like, I tried to remind myself all the time that like literally days before publication, I was like 51-49 not publishing it. And that's helpful, but it also, I guess it could also be dangerous, because what if there was actually something I shouldn't publish, and now I'm like, oh, I'm going to hit publish because last time I thought that it turned out I was just having cold feet. So it's a weird feeling when you realize that you don't really know anything.
Yeah, but I think that I I think that the best way you can do your thing in your one life and contribute is, unless it seems really bad, throw it out there. And by the way, you might not, something might, sell 1/10 of that, but it really impacts the people who love it, right? Maybe sometimes it's like a cult classic. It doesn't go viral, but it's deeply beloved by the people. I have a few posts like that, which are the ones that I feel like the super fans talk about, always reference, but they're not actually, they didn't do very well, and like, as far as numbers. And then other ones that were mega viral that I've never heard like an actual, like, big time wait but why reader mention, because it's just not really, so so I think there's if you put time into it, there's something in there that someone will love. But I also like to think about the Beatles. Like, they put out 200 songs about, and 100 of them are bad. I don't think people realize how, there's a great, I think it's Vanity Fair article, that goes, or maybe it's Vulture. It goes through 200, ranking the Beatles songs from worst to best, and this guy's in mine. But he's really big Beatles fan, big music person, and it's amazing how long you have to go before you've heard of the songs. Like, they wrote a lot of just bad, forgettable songs, and it's really like their top 70. Their top 70 were good, and what made them the Beatles was like their top 20 or 30 were amazing, but they put out 200 to find those. And so I feel like the best thing, if you take the big zoom out, it's like, rather than obsess over which finished projects, or put them all out, rough and dirty, make a new one. Don't be a perfectionist. Make stuff, put it out, and you never know when you just strike magic and it's the right thing at the right time. And yeah, I think that is kind of the mentality. And this is, and I say this as someone who regularly starts a blog post and then says nah, and goes the other way. But yeah, I think you're remembered for your hits, and you got to give yourself a lot of swings at the bat, swings at the bat, to get those. Which is, by the way, part of why I hate doing a 6-year project. A 6-year project blows, because it's not, it's taking
all or
a
nothing.
6-year swing of the bat. Well, it's also just like, I don't want to take it. I don't have enough time to take any 6-year swings. It doesn't matter what it is, And so it's like, I feel like that's I should have a 1-year limit on future projects, maybe 2.
Well, quantity is a way to get to quality, and that's really hard if you're a perfectionist or you have high standards. The idea that you have to accept that objectively a good chunk of your stuff is not only not going to be as good as your other stuff, it might not be good at all. That is a hard bit of acceptance and realism that you have to come to terms with. Or just to think, I mean, like Bill Belichick has lost a lot of Super Bowls, right? Like that, like you tend to focus on when it worked. Yes. Like, but ultimately the only way you can win a Super Bowl is by taking a trip to the Super Bowl. Right. And so if you focus more on like sort of getting in the ballpark, and you get in the ballpark a number of times, chances are, you're going to walk away with whatever that metric of success is, if you do that often enough.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's like, if your general average work is good, right? If you're putting out 10 bad things in a row, well, now you're going to lose people's trust. But then you probably, honestly, then you might not be. I mean, it depends. If you're really early, then you might have a long way, a lot of growth left. But if you're just, if you've been doing this for a long time, you put a 10, maybe you need to adjust the medium or whatever. But the point is, if you're having a hit, here and there, and most things are, a lot of things are pretty well liked. Some things are, then you should just pump it out as long as your average is pretty good, because you're going to
Yeah.
get some hits along the way, and then the bad things won't be the norm. And so screw it, like put out, and I think it is actually a superpower to
Yes.
not be terrified of having a flop. I have a friend who was a stand-up comedian, and one of the things he did early is he just went out there and intentionally bombed. He just went out there and just made just really stupid jokes and long pauses, and people eventually was booing. And he just said, "I want to feel it and realize the sky didn't fall on me, and now I can just relax." And it's kind of a superpower, I think, to accept that some of the things are going to be bad, and that's totally okay.
Yeah, I think about it, it's like as long as you're making contact with the ball, that's what you want, right? Sometimes it's going to go far over the back wall. Sometimes it's going to go high up in the air and someone's going to catch it, right? Sometimes it's going to go foul. But the important thing is that you're making contact with the ball consistently. And if that's how you're judging success, you're going to hit you're also going to probably have a number of home runs to show for that. To go to what your comedian friend is talking about, if you're also aware that the worst thing that can happen is that you strike out, or the worst thing that can happen is people are bored, or they laugh at you, or you get fired, you realize that that's not so bad either. So you're sort of open to the upside, but you've capped the downside. That's like the ultimate, position to be operating from.
You have to be able to, the human superpower is to realize that embarrassment isn't that big a deal, because we really hate being embarrassed, publicly embarrassed. And, doing something publicly, putting it out there, your art, your work, your thoughts, and people don't like it, it gets made fun of, whatever. People are writing mean comments. It's, people in your life, your friends and family are seeing those, right? Everyone, is seeing. It's a little embarrassing. It feels bad, right? It feels, and then you step back and realize, like, I'm a writer. My job is to put myself out there. This is gonna happen. It's gonna happen, and especially if I'm trying to be bold and do different things, and also, like, if other people are seeing it, I don't care. Like, it's like it's like it's part of a much bigger picture, and it's this amazing thing to realize, like, yeah, it feels bad, but like, there's so many people who do everything in their power. Number one priority is make sure that never happens. Make sure they're not publicly embarrassed ever. Publicly, they don't look bad publicly ever. They don't look like they made a mistake publicly. I mean, it's like, that is such a limiting thing.
Yeah, I think self-consciousness is the enemy, right? Because it's the opposite of being present. It's usually rooted in fear, or like a sort of a thirstiness, like you really want validation or approval or a certain thing to happen. It's very outcome dependent. The best position is where you're not thinking about that shit at all. You're just thinking about what you're trying to do.
One thing I've done that's been very one of the wise things I do is, when I get a flat tire or a fender bender, or I twist my ankle and need to be on crutches, when it's something really annoying, and I'm like, wow, I still have to do all the things I had to do on my list, and now I also have this thing, right? It's so easy to just be like, and just be like, the world has wronged me. This is now, I can't believe this, and like, or you can say, 5 to 10 of these things happen every year. It is 100% 5 to 10 of these things. I just got one out of the way. Oh, here we go. Here's one of those 5 to 10. Here it is. I didn't know what was going to happen today, but there's the flat tire at 2 a.m. And it's just, once you have that, you suddenly shrug. You put on a podcast and start changing your tire, or you're waiting for AAA, and it happens. Oh, I got one out of the way. So you can apply this as well to, I put out a blog post and it's just being hated on, right? Oh my God, on Reddit, they hate me. As a writer, you think I'm going to go through a writing career and not have 20 or 30 of these? Oh, here's one, getting it out of the way. So that zoom out and understanding the inevitability of this thing totally takes the sting away, because it doesn't feel like something bad happened. I fucked up. I made like I wish I could go. It's like, well, yeah, but like, I'm going to fuck up, and that's okay. And so it's kind of baked in, and then you don't care nearly as much.
Well, there's a passage in Meditations where Marcus Aurelius talks about this in regards to people. He goes like, look, is a world without assholes possible? He's like, no, obviously not. And then he's like, so when you meet an asshole, say to yourself, this is one of those people. This is one of that number, right? I was never, it was statistically certain that I would bump into this person. It was unavoidable. By the way, they're a minority. I know this statistically also. And, now that I didn't, because I wasn't telling myself that this was impossible or even unlikely, I'm not only less surprised, I get to say what you said, which is, okay, I've met one out of the 100, and now it's probably going to be a little while before I bump into the next one of these people.
You also don't take it personally because you think this person has been being an asshole to everyone, not just me. And it's the same thing with it. By the way, a troll in the comment section. Sometimes you can click on their thing and see what other comments they've been making, right? On Reddit or on Discuss on WordPress. And so often, oh, they're shit talking 10 blogs right now, right? The last, and then you suddenly don't care anymore because you say, this isn't about me. One of these people passed through, and their shit, they got shit on this, like they got shit. It's not like, oh my God, why would I engage with this? It's nothing to do with me. It's nothing to, and you just, again, all you're doing is.
And even to say to yourself, this person is doing their job, right? This person is a troll. This person is an asshole. That's their role out of 100 people. Why would I expect them to be anything other than whatever they were apparently assigned by circumstances or their personality or whatever? This is what they do. And then you say to yourself, my job is to not be an asshole, right? So when I'm being an asshole, I'm neglecting my responsibilities. And when I'm being nice and when I'm being good and when I'm not treating people terribly, that's me fulfilling my job on this planet. And if we can kind of see people as being assigned to these roles, it does allow us to be, I think, a bit more accepting of the fact that they're not always going to be and do what we want them to do.
And get rid of that, like this inane feeling that like I need to show them that they're wrong. I need to punish them I need to like come back with a snappy retort and it's like, no, I don't. That is not the point here. That's not the goal with this person. And then what you're letting them do is do something much worse than be an asshole. You're letting them become an asshole whirlpool that pulls other people into it. Now they're all acting like assholes. You're letting them spread the thing. It's like, no, quarantine the assholeness in that one person by shrugging and saying, I guess this person is that person who's an asshole.
Yeah, don't let the son of a bitches turn you into a son of a bitch, I sometimes say.
Yeah. So Twitter is really good at doing that, which is part of the problem. I think, it's just funny when you meet people, I'm sure you've experienced this, where you've gotten, negativity online, and then you meet people in person who know your stuff, and just like, it's even people who don't like, it's just everyone is so civil and so kind and nice and normal in person. I'm
not sure I've ever met someone who doesn't like my work in person. Like, I'm sure they exist, but no one has ever told me to my face, that I suck. The worst thing I've heard in person pales in comparison to what I hear online every single day.
Of course, or the people will be gentle about it. They'll say, I really, really like your stuff. Did you ever consider, this aspect of it? Because I feel like, maybe you skipped over that a little bit, blah, blah, blah. And online they're saying, oh, this really shows the type of person that Tim is, it's just this, personal nasty. And it's, it's the same, there's, I'm sure some of those, there's something about, being online that just, because a lot of what we've been talking about in this whole conversation is the dichotomy from what our stupid brains get full fall for, and then when you can zoom out and see the truth, the real thing, what our smart part of our brains can see is real. And so this is another example where it's just like the something about being online when it's hard when you can just fall for the fact that you can think this is a non-human who's not a real person with, and then in person, like you're forced to zoom out and say, oh, this is a complete human being, here they are. Plus there's just social etiquette. Like it takes a lot more courage to be a dick in person than it does behind the screen.
Well, no, I think the new book is a great meditation on what happens when that is happening on the societal level. I like the idea of a self-help book for the world. Like, what do we collectively have to be thinking about in terms of our collective values or traits if we don't want to blow ourselves up or destroy each other? And I think it's very well done. And I'm sorry it took 6 years, but I'm also glad that it finally came out.
Yeah, never again, but I'm happy it's done.
Well, that's perfect. Let's not have that be the rule for the podcast. And when you come out to Austin sometime, let's do it again in person.
Agreed. Would love to.